The extraterrestrial beings were investigating the source of the offerings left at the war monument. It turned out to be an enemy human soldier. Before we delve into this narrative, please leave a quick greeting in the comments and mention where you are tuning in from. Your engagement truly helps support the channel. The Valyrian Empire had endured numerous conflicts across 3 galaxies, but none had left a more profound scar than the struggle against humanity. On the planet designated for remembrance, Sanctus Prime, beneath skies of violet hues and alongside twin moons, stood the Wall of the Fallen, bearing the names of 273,000 souls etched into crystalline stone. Every morning the custodians would arrive to tend to the hallowed ground, and every morning they discovered something inexplicable. Commander Thalen of the Valyrian Guard stood before the wall for the 100th time in as many days, his 4 arms crossed in a posture of bewilderment. At the monument's base, meticulously arranged, were fresh blossoms. Not the indigenous Valyrian flora, which grew in spiraling patterns and emitted soft melodies at dawn, but humble terrestrial roses, specifically the red variety, a dozen in number, their stems precisely severed, water still clinging to their petals like dew. This enigma had commenced precisely 100 days prior, coinciding with the anniversary of the peace accord. Thalen had arrived at the break of dawn for his routine survey, anticipating finding the memorial deserted and immaculate as always. Instead, he found a solitary crimson rose placed with deliberate care against the wall, directly beneath the designation of Captain Eurus. Initially, he dismissed it as an error, perhaps a jape by some impetuous Valyrian with a deficient sense of humor. However, the subsequent morning, there were 2 roses. The morning thereafter, 3. Each day, the quantity augmented by 1. Until this very moment, 100 days hence, a full dozen roses appeared each dawn, arranged with flawless symmetry. Thalen had exhausted all avenues. He intensified security patrols. He implemented more advanced detection systems. He even remained vigilant for 3 consecutive nights, observing the memorial from concealed vantage points. None of it yielded results. The flowers materialized as if brought forth by an unseen force, and their benefactor possessed either technology far exceeding Valyrian comprehension or abilities verging on the supernatural. "This is utterly preposterous," Thalen declared to his second-in-command Lieutenant Sarah. "The peace treaty was ratified 6 months ago. All humans have vacated this sector. Our sensors indicate no unauthorized vessels within a radius of 10 light years. Yet without fail, each morning, there are flowers." Sarah, whose silvery skin shimmered in the morning light like burnished metal, knelt beside the roses. Her optical sensors, capable of perceiving the ultraviolet spectrum, examined the blossoms with intense scrutiny. She scanned them with her wrist-mounted device, and her expression became etched with concern. "Commander, these were harvested less than 4 hours ago. The cellular degradation points to their cultivation in Earth's standard soil composition, with trace elements that correspond to the agricultural regions of the North American continent on Terrera. These originated from a human garden. Furthermore, whoever is delivering them employs horticultural methods that suggest expert proficiency. These are not random blossoms plucked in haste. They were cultivated, nurtured, and specifically chosen for this purpose." Thalen's jaw tightened. He remembered the war with acute clarity. 3 years of savage conflict that neither faction had truly triumphed in. The Valyrians possessed superior numbers and energy weaponry. They commanded shields capable of withstanding direct nuclear detonations and starships that could outpace anything in the human armada. They had engaged in combat across a dozen star systems, achieving victory after victory through sheer military dominance. But the humans possessed something entirely different. They exhibited a creativity bordering on the absurd, a resilience against defeat that seemed intrinsically woven into their very being, and a capacity for both horrific brutality and inexplicable benevolence that perpetually confounded every Valyrian strategist. They fought with stratagems that no Valyrian computational system could anticipate. They transformed setbacks into triumphs through sheer audacity. They fashioned armaments from discarded materials and secured victories that logic dictated they should have lost. Thalen had meticulously studied Terran forces throughout the duration of the war. He pored over their military histories, dissected their tactical doctrines, and endeavored to comprehend the psychological elements that rendered them such formidable adversaries. What he uncovered unsettled him profoundly. Humans had been engaged in internecine conflict for their entire recorded existence. They had elevated warfare to an art form, encompassing every conceivable environment and scenario. Their strategies, refined and adapted over millennia, proved devastating when directed against an external foe. Yet what truly instilled dread in Valyrian commanders was not human aggression, but their innate capacity for clemency. Human combatants would fight with terrifying ferocity, only to imperil their own lives to rescue wounded adversaries. They would annihilate entire battalions without hesitation, then mourn the loss of individual lives. They embodied a paradox of contradictions that no Valyrian psychological profile could adequately explicate. The war concluded not with a decisive victory, but with mutual exhaustion. Both military establishments had been severely depleted. Fleets were decimated. Entire worlds bore the scars of bombardment. The economic toll was astronomical. Ultimately, when both the Valyrian High Council and the Terran Federation recognized that continued hostilities would result in mutual annihilation, they agreed to parley. The negotiations spanned several months. Neither side harbored any trust in the other. Every stipulation was subjected to endless debate, but eventually, a peace treaty was consummated. Borders were re-established, and both species pledged to maintain the contested systems as neutral territory. Sanctus Prime, the site of the war's most ferocious engagement, was designated a memorial world by mutual consensus. It was to remain demilitarized, devoid of weaponry or military installations, serving solely as a repository for monuments commemorating their losses. The Valyrians erected their memorial on the northern continent. The humans constructed theirs on the southern continent, across a valley that had once been a brutal battlefield. Both factions agreed to honor their own fallen and coexist in peace. Except, someone was evidently disregarding the accord. "Initiate comprehensive surveillance," Thalen commanded. "I want every square centimeter of this memorial under observation. Motion detectors, thermal imaging, quantum signature analysis. Whatever is responsible for this, we will apprehend it." Over the subsequent week, the Valyrian military deployed a level of security equipment sufficient to safeguard a munitions depot. They deployed cutting-edge technology, including optical devices with night vision capabilities that could detect a minuscule insect from half a kilometer away, and thermal sensors sensitive enough to perceive heat signatures through solid barriers. Pressure plates were calibrated to register the impact of even a falling leaf. Energy scanners were programmed to detect any living organism larger than a rodent, tuned to identify the specific bioelectric signature of humans. Seismic sensors, buried beneath the memorial gardens, were designed to pick up footsteps from 100 meters distant. Atmospheric analyzers were deployed to detect human pheromones or exhalations. They installed quantum field detectors, devices capable of sensing temporal anomalies or cloaking fields. Overlapping sensor grids were established, leaving no blind spots. They even procured military-grade equipment from the capital, technology typically reserved for the personal protection of the Emperor himself. Lieutenant Sarah personally oversaw the installation process. As a specialist in defensive systems, she had designed security grids for 3 military installations during the war. If anyone could apprehend this intruder, it was she. On the inaugural night following the installation, Thalen convened his team in the monitoring hub, a repurposed structure situated half a kilometer from the memorial. 20 screens displayed various angles of the Wall of the Fallen. Readouts presented data from hundreds of sensors encompassing energy levels, atmospheric composition, ground vibrations, and electromagnetic fields, every conceivable indicator of an intruder's presence. "This is utterly absurd," muttered Corporal Vest, a young Valyrian who had joined the guard post-war. "We have enough equipment here to detect a phantom. Nothing could possibly evade this." Sarah shot him a sharp reprimand. "Humans are not constrained by what should be logically possible, Corporal. They are cunning, inventive, and entirely unpredictable. Never underestimate them." Thalen nodded slowly. Sarah had experienced the war firsthand. She had witnessed humans transform certain defeat into improbable triumph. She had observed them jury-rig weaponry from damaged equipment, navigate ostensibly impenetrable minefields, and endure situations that defied all odds. Humans did not adhere to conventional rules of warfare or logic. They improvised. They adapted. They found a way. The flowers continued to appear. On the 8th day of the Comprehensive Surveillance Initiative, Thalen sat in the monitoring station, his gaze fixed on screens that depicted nothing out of the ordinary. All sensor readings were within nominal parameters. No movement, no thermal signatures, no energy fluctuations, nothing. At precisely 0300 hours, all the camera feeds flickered simultaneously. The disruption lasted less than a second, a brief interruption, barely perceptible. When the feeds re-established, there were the flowers. 13 white lilies this time, arranged in a pattern that Thalen gradually recognized as the Valyrian emblem for remembrance. Someone possessing knowledge of Valyrian culture had deliberately placed them. "Sarah, analyze that disruption," Thalen commanded. "Inform me of what transpired." She worked with haste, retrieving detailed logs from every system. "Commander, this is inexplicable. All our sensors registered a localized electromagnetic pulse, yet it was too faint to account for the visual anomaly we observed. It was akin to something interfering with our equipment at a quantum level, disrupting observation without leaving a detectable trace. The energy signature does not correspond to any known human technology." Thalen leaned forward, scrutinizing the data. "Display the camera footage frame by frame." Sarah accessed the recording. They watched as the timestamp approached 0300 hours. The image was crystal clear, showing the empty memorial. Then, for exactly 23 frames, the image exhibited a subtle blurring. It was so slight as to be easily missed during real-time viewing, but in slow motion, they could discern something. A distortion in space, a shadow that moved with a velocity exceeding the recording equipment's capacity to accurately track. Thalen instructed Sarah to enhance the image, applying every available filter and algorithmic process. As the computer processed the data, a form began to materialize from the blur. It was humanoid, tall, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of practiced skill. The figure approached the memorial wall, knelt, placed the flowers with deliberate care, and then withdrew. The entire sequence transpired in less than 15 seconds. "Freeze that frame," Thalen stated, pointing at the screen. "There. Enhance that specific area." The computer zoomed in on the indistinct figure. Even with extensive processing, the image remained blurry, as if viewed through water, yet Thalen could discern certain characteristics. The figure wore dark attire, moved with military precision, and carried something on its back, possibly a pack or equipment. Most tellingly, the body proportions were human, not Valyrian with its 4 limbs and broad shoulders. Human, bipedal, compact build. "They are sending us a ghost," Sarah murmured, looking over his shoulder. "Or they possess stealth technology we have never encountered." Thalen stood abruptly, his mind racing. During the war, human stealth technology had been adept, but not infallible. Valyrian sensors could typically detect cloaked human vessels or soldiers. This was something entirely different, suggesting either a monumental leap forward in technological capability or access to equipment that had been meticulously concealed during the conflict. Neither prospect offered comfort. "Increase the guard rotation," Thalen ordered. "Double all patrols. I want soldiers visible at all times. Perhaps the presence of personnel will deter whoever this is." He paused, then added, "And I will remain here tonight myself. If this is a human, if they are somehow circumventing every sensor we possess, I will be present when they arrive." "Sir, is that advisable?" Sarah inquired. "If this constitutes a hostile act, if someone intends to infiltrate the memorial for some objective, you could be in grave danger." Thalen shook his head. "No, this is not hostile. If they wish to desecrate the memorial, they could have done so on 100 occasions. They are leaving flowers. Sarah, honoring our fallen. This is something else." That night, Thalen dismissed the other guards from the immediate vicinity of the memorial. He maintained the automated systems in operation but withdrew the visible military presence. He desired the unknown entity to feel sufficiently at ease to reveal itself. Then, he sat alone at the memorial on a stone bench strategically positioned to afford him an unobstructed view of the wall of the fallen. The twin moons ascended high in the sky, casting a silvery luminescence across the crystalline names. Each one represented a Valyrian soldier who would never return home. Thalen had known many of them personally. Private Kellen, who had 3 children awaiting his return from deployment and never did. Commander Vessa, who composed poetry during the quiet interludes between battles, dreaming of teaching literature after the war concluded. Lieutenant Draxus, who had personally saved Thalen's life on 2 separate occasions. First during the engagement at Kepler Station, and again during the desperate withdrawal from the outer colonies. Thalen allowed his mind to drift through memories he typically kept suppressed. The war had exacted an immeasurable toll on everyone. Young soldiers destined for lives of family, careers, and galactic exploration instead fought and perished in battles that ultimately yielded nothing but shared suffering. The political leaders had declared victory upon the signing of the treaty, but every veteran understood the unvarnished truth. Nobody truly won. Both sides simply ceased to lose. At 0200 hours, Thalen perceived nothing, saw nothing, and sensed nothing out of the ordinary. The night air was cool against his skin, carrying the fragrance of indigenous flora that grew wild around the memorial. Somewhere in the distance, a nocturnal creature emitted a mournful cry. The twin moons continued their unhurried traverse across the violet firmament. All seemed perfectly tranquil. However, every instinct honed over 20 years of military service suddenly screamed a premonition. He was not alone. It was not a sensation he could consciously identify. No sound, no movement, no environmental alteration, only an absolute certainty that another presence was near, observing, anticipating. "Reveal yourself," he said softly, remaining seated. "I am aware you are present. I am unarmed. I am not recording. This exchange will be solely between us." For a protracted moment, silence reigned. The wind rustled through the gardens. The nocturnal creature vocalized once more. Thalen began to question if his instincts had betrayed him, if he was succumbing to delusion after too many sleepless nights. Then from behind a pillar he could have sworn was vacant moments before, a figure emerged. The human was tall and slender, possessing a physique indicative of strenuous physical labor rather than military conditioning. He wore civilian attire that was worn and faded, practically disintegrating at the seams. His hair was dark, interspersed with strands of silver. His face bore the lines of age and something deeper, something Thalen recognized from his own reflection each morning. The expression of someone who had witnessed an overwhelming amount of death and carried enduring specters. The human's hands were rough, calloused from manual work. He carried himself with deliberate restraint, moving slowly and purposefully to appear non-threatening, yet Thalen discerned the underlying military training, the spatial awareness, the economical movements, the latent readiness to react if necessary. This was a soldier, irrespective of his attire. In his hands, he held a simple bouquet of flowers, this time of a yellow hue, wrapped in cloth that appeared to be handmade. "My name is Nathan Brooks," the human stated, his voice quiet yet firm, carrying a subtle accent that Thalen recognized from intelligence reports as originating from Earth's North American region. "I served in the Terran Defense Fleet during the war. I was present at the Battle of Sanctus Prime. I held the rank of lieutenant. I was a fire control officer aboard the TDF Perseverance." Thalen slowly rose, ensuring his hands remained visible and empty. He made no abrupt movements or aggressive gestures. "You are in violation of the peace treaty," he stated. "Humans are strictly forbidden in this sector. The penalty for unauthorized presence on Sanctus Prime is immediate apprehension and trial before the Interstellar Court." Nathan nodded slowly, meeting Thalen's gaze unflinchingly. "I am aware. I have been in violation of it daily for 6 months. I have traversed into prohibited space 157 times. I have circumvented your security systems. I have contravened at least 43 separate treaty provisions. I am fully cognizant of the repercussions and accept them." He paused, then added, "But I could not refrain from coming." "Why?" Thalen demanded, genuine bewilderment coloring his voice. "What purpose does this serve? The war is concluded. Your people have earned the right to return to your own territories. You could be on Earth, living in peace, rebuilding your lives. Instead, you risk everything to leave offerings at the graves of your adversaries. Explain this to me, for I fail to comprehend human motivations." Nathan moved toward the memorial wall, and Thalen tensed slightly. But the human simply knelt and placed the flowers at its base, adjacent to a name located approximately 2/3 of the way down the left side. Captain Eurus. The name was inscribed in crystalline letters that gleamed in the moonlight. Nathan gently placed his hand upon the stone beneath the name, and Thalen observed that his hand trembled. "I am deeply sorry," Nathan said to the inscription, his voice cracking. "I am so incredibly sorry. You did not deserve to perish. None of them did. Not a single one of them. Thalen felt a chilling sensation settle in his chest. He moved closer, his gaze falling upon the name the human had selected. Eurus had been a renowned officer, a tactical prodigy, and Thalen's own mentor. He had served for 30 years, ascending through the ranks through his exceptional skill and unwavering dedication. He believed in honorable combat, in minimizing civilian casualties, and in treating prisoners with dignity. He was universally respected by all who served alongside him. He had been 58 years old when he died. He had a wife who still observed mourning attire, children who visited his name on this wall without fail every month, grandchildren who would never have the chance to know him. He perished during the final assault on the Terran defensive perimeter, Thalen stated quietly, killed by human artillery fire. The barrage originated from Grid Sector 7 Alpha. It was devastating. We sustained over 2,000 casualties in 7 minutes. Nathan looked up at him, and Thalen was struck by the profound sorrow etched in the human's eyes, the kind of anguish that could not be feigned or manufactured, the kind born from carrying an unbearable burden for an extended period. Yes, Nathan affirmed. 7 minutes. I know precisely how long it lasted because I observed the chronometer throughout the entire duration. I inputted the targeting coordinates. I verified the fire solutions. I issued the authorization code. Then I watched as our artillery systems executed the bombardment. 417 kinetic rounds, 92 plasma mortars, 38 cluster missile payloads. I can recite every weapon type, every timing sequence, every target adjustment. I remember it all. You have come here to taunt us, Thalen declared, his voice hardening despite the confusion swirling within him. To gloat over your victories, to remind us of our defeat. Nathan's face contorted with an emotion that seemed a blend of fury and profound grief. No, Commander. No. I have come to offer an apology. I have come because I was the one who killed him. Me. Personally. My finger on the authorization key, my voice issuing the command to fire, and he did not deserve to die. None of them deserved to die as they did. He rose slowly, facing Thalen directly. Do you wish to know what it sounded like? Upon receiving confirmation of the strikes, the communications officer reported 2,300 casualties, eliciting cheers. Commander, young soldiers rejoiced at the elimination of over 2,000 enemy combatants. Drinks were distributed in the mess hall that evening. Congratulations, Lieutenant Brooks, they said. Outstanding targeting. You saved countless human lives today. That is what they conveyed to me. And you believed it was wrong, Phelan stated, attempting to grasp the situation. You felt killing enemy soldiers in wartime was something to be ashamed of? Nathan slowly shook his head. Not then. At that time, I believed I had fulfilled my duty. I slept that night convinced I was a competent soldier who had properly executed my directives. It was not until 2 days later that the truth came to light. Your people were broadcasting on all frequencies, pleading for a cessation of hostilities in Grid Sector 7 Alpha. Nathan continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Explaining the presence of civilians in the vicinity, evacuating refugees from a settlement, providing precise coordinates, and requesting safe passage for non-combatants under the laws of warfare. Our communications were disrupted, he added. Some form of solar interference, they later claimed, or perhaps deliberate jamming by an unknown party. We never determined the cause, but we never received those transmissions. We observed your military column advancing. We detected what our sensors interpreted as enemy combat units. We made tactical decisions based on incomplete intelligence. And by the time we comprehended the gravity of our actions, it was too late. By the time someone unjammed the communications and we heard your pleas, nothing remained in Grid Sector 7 Alpha but devastation and bodies. Phelan's breath caught in his throat. He recalled the aftermath. Rescue teams sifting through debris, the discovery of small corpses in what had been a schoolhouse, the parents arriving at the evacuation site only to find their children gone, the wails, the sorrow, the fury, the utter disbelief that war could claim not only soldiers but innocent lives with such chilling efficiency. I was responsible for the deaths of 378 civilians that day, Commander, Nathan said, his voice cracking. I killed them because I was too hesitant to question my orders, too focused on adhering to procedure to consider the implications of my actions. And one of your finest officers perished attempting to protect them. Captain Thas was personally leading the evacuation. He was unarmed. He was piloting a transport vehicle filled with children when my ordnance struck him. Phelan closed his eyes, recalling the reports. Urin had volunteered for the evacuation mission. He was under no obligation to go. He was a senior officer. He could have delegated the task to subordinates, but that was not Urin's nature. He led from the forefront. He shielded those who were vulnerable. And he died because a human weapons officer made a decision based on flawed data. For a considerable moment, silence hung between them. The wind stirred the memorial garden, rustling leaves that spiraled and hummed softly. The twin moons cast dancing shadows upon the crystalline stone. The weight of history pressed upon them both. "Why flowers?" Phelan finally inquired, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. "Why not a message? Why not pursue official channels, extend formal apologies? The Federation has established diplomatic protocols for war crimes and civilian casualties. You could have submitted reports, requested tribunals, faced judgment appropriately." Nathan emitted a bitter laugh, devoid of any humor. "Because what would I have said? 'I am sorry I killed your friends' is not a sentiment reserved for diplomatic correspondence. Sorry I murdered children. Sorry I annihilated families. Sorry I extinguished futures brimming with potential. Those words are meaningless on official documents. They are processed, filed, archived, and forgotten. Because official apologies are mere words on paper, endorsed by politicians who were never present, who never smelled the smoke, heard the screams, or felt the immense cost of what transpired." He turned back to the wall, placing his hand once more on Captain Das's name. "Because in my culture, when you have wronged someone, you tend to their grave. You ensure their memory endures. You do it with your own hands, for as long as it takes. You do not dispatch a representative. You do not abdicate your culpability. You bear it. You own it. You integrate it into your very being, so that you never forget and never repeat the transgression." "How long will that take?" Phelan asked softly. Nathan met his gaze steadily. "I do not know. Perhaps never. I may be here, leaving flowers, as an elderly man struggling to walk, utilizing my remaining strength to place one more rose for the individuals I eliminated 40 years prior. But I will persist until I am deceased, or until someone intervenes. These individuals deserved more than to perish because I initiated an attack. The least I can do is ensure their memory is preserved. The least I can do is carry their names within my heart, so they are not merely statistics in a casualty report." Phelan felt a shift in his perception. The Valyrian propaganda during the conflict had depicted humans as barbarous warriors devoid of honor, savage beings who would resort to any means to achieve victory, valuing triumph over integrity, and treating warfare as a game to be won rather than a tragedy to be concluded. His commanders had instilled in him the belief that humans posed a danger precisely because they lacked the moral compass that guided Valyrian society. They were capable of deception, trickery, theft, and murder, unburdened by the constraints of honor or ethics. Yet, this individual before him contradicted every tenet of those lessons. Nathan had journeyed across hostile space, risking imprisonment or death, abandoning any life he had established post-war, all to place flowers for enemies he had slain. This was not the conduct of someone lacking honor. This was something entirely different, something the Valyrian understanding of humanity had entirely overlooked. "You cannot continue this," Phelan stated, though his tone had transformed. It was no longer an order or a threat, but almost a plea, a concern for this broken human who was self-destructing under the weight of guilt. "The treaty expressly forbids it. If my superiors discover this, they will demand your arrest. It will precipitate an interstellar incident. The peace is precarious. Both governments are actively seeking justifications to recommence hostilities. Hardliners on both sides desire the continuation of the war. If they learn that a human is illegally entering Valyrian space, violating our memorial, it could provide the pretext they need." "Then do not inform them," Nathan replied simply. "Or arrest me now. I will offer no resistance. I will depart without a struggle. But I will not allow these individuals to be forgotten. Not if I can help it. Even if I spend the remainder of my life in a Valerian prison, even if they execute me for treaty violations, at least I will have attempted. At least I will know I did everything within my power to honor the people I killed. Phelan stood and began to pace. His military training dictated that this was a clear violation. His duty was unambiguous, but a quieter voice, something human soldiers had imparted during the war, offered a different perspective. Sometimes rules and honor are not synonymous. "Tell me about the others," Phelan said suddenly. "You mentioned being at the Battle of Sanctus Prime. You must have participated in more than one engagement." Nathan nodded slowly. "I served as a soldier for 8 years. The majority of that time was spent in the war against your people." He stood and moved to another section of the wall, placing his hand near another name. "Lieutenant Veracus. I shot down her vessel during the 4th engagement in the Kuiper Belt. She ejected, but her pod's life support failed before rescue arrived." He proceeded to another name, Commander Solace Dren. "His battalion was caught in a minefield, one my unit had laid. 78 soldiers perished." He continued walking, touching name after name. "Private Jen Kovar, Sergeant Thelmore, Captain Yes Brennan. I remember them all. Commander, every single one." Phelan followed, listening as Nathan recounted the details of each demise. Battles he vividly recalled, decisions made in mere fractions of seconds that resulted in lost lives. The human's recollection was precise, not due to any technological enhancement, but because he had compelled himself to remember, had made himself carry each death as a personal burden. "You will destroy yourself," Phelan stated quietly. "Grief of this magnitude will consume you." Nathan turned to face him. "Good. Let it. I have earned it." "No," Phelan declared firmly. "You have not." He gestured to the wall. "I fought in every one of those engagements you mentioned. I issued orders that resulted in the deaths of human soldiers. I made tactical decisions that led to lives being extinguished. War is a mechanism that devours soldiers from both sides." "But I killed civilians," Nathan countered, his voice rising slightly. "Children, Commander. There was a school in that settlement. 6 children between the ages of 5 and 12. I killed them because I was too slow to question my orders, too focused on adhering to procedure to consider the implications of my actions. And I," Phelan stated, his voice hardening, "destroyed a human medical frigate because my sensors indicated it was a troop transport. It was clearly marked with medical insignia. But I convinced myself it was a ruse. There were 200 patients aboard, wounded soldiers who could have been saved. Doctors, nurses, all deceased because I could not trust my own perceptions." Nathan stared at him. "The mercy of Athens. That was you." "That was me," Phelan confirmed. "So you see, we are both killers, both haunted, both attempting to atone in our own ways. The question is not whether we deserve forgiveness. The question is what we do now." "What can we do?" Nathan inquired. "The war is over. The deceased are gone. We cannot bring them back." Phelan gazed at the memorial wall, at the thousands of names representing lives cut short. Then he looked at Nathan, at this adversary who had become something else, something he lacked a word for in Valerian. "You are right," Phelan said. "You cannot bring them back, but you can ensure they are not forgotten, and you should not do it alone." Nathan blinked. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting," Phelan replied, "that starting tomorrow, you will enter through the main gate. You will register with the memorial services as an official visitor. You will have authorization to be here, and you will not be the only one leaving flowers." The human appeared astonished. "You would permit that? Your people would accept a human coming to their memorial?" "Some would not," Phelan admitted. "Many would not. But I am the commander of this facility, and I have discretion over who visits. Besides," he allowed himself a faint smile, "I suspect once people understand why you are here, you may be surprised by the reaction." In the ensuing weeks, Nathan began to visit through the official channels. He registered. He was issued a visitor's badge, and as Phelan had promised, he was not alone. On the first day, Phelan himself accompanied Nathan to the wall. Together they laid flowers. The Valyrian commander shared accounts of the soldiers whose names were etched in stone. Nathan listened and recounted what he knew of the battles where they had fallen. The second week, Lieutenant Sarah joined them. She had lost her brother in the war. Nathan had not been involved in that specific engagement, but he knelt with her at her brother's name and listened as she spoke of who he had been before becoming a soldier. He had aspired to be a teacher. He had loved music. He had been kind. By the third week, other Valorans began to appear. Some were drawn by curiosity. Others came because they had heard of the human who traveled across space to offer an apology. A few came because, like Phelan, they carried their own memories of humans they had killed and could not forget. Not everyone was receptive. There were protests and irate families who did not want a human anywhere near the memorial. Phelan spent long hours explaining, justifying, and defending his decision. But gradually, slowly, something began to shift. One morning, a Valyrian mother approached Nathan as he was placing flowers. Her son had perished in the bombardment Nathan had ordered. She knew this because Phelan had ensured complete transparency regarding Nathan's presence. Nathan braced himself for her anger, her grief, her entirely justified rage. Instead, she handed him a bouquet of flowers. "Help me place these," she said softly. "Tell me about that day. Tell me what happened to my son." Nathan complied. He recounted everything he knew, the tactical situation, the desperation of that moment, the horror that followed when they realized what they had struck. He offered no excuses, made no attempt to diminish his culpability. He simply spoke the truth. When he concluded, the mother was weeping. Yet she took his hand, this enemy soldier who had killed her child, and she said, "Thank you for remembering him. Thank you for bearing that burden. He would not have wanted you to destroy yourself over this. My son believed in honor. He would have understood that you were a soldier following orders in an impossible situation." Nathan wept with her, and Phelan, observing from a distance, grasped something profound. Humans possessed a saying, "To err is human, to forgive divine." But perhaps forgiveness was not divine at all. Perhaps it was the most fundamentally sentient act any species could undertake. The choice to perceive the individual behind the action. The courage to relinquish hatred, even when it was merited. 6 months after Nathan had first revealed himself, a special ceremony was held at the memorial. Representatives from both the Valyrian Empire and the Terran Federation were in attendance. It was the first joint event since the signing of the peace treaty. There was an undercurrent of tension, awkwardness, the palpable weight of too much history and too much pain. Phelan stood at a podium before the assembled multitude and spoke. He told them about Nathan, about the flowers, about the countless mornings when an enemy soldier had risked everything to honor the fallen Valorans, and about the significance of that gesture to him and to others who had also visited the human memorial across the valley. Then Nathan spoke. He did not discuss politics or diplomacy. He spoke of the names on the wall, of who they had been, of what they had meant to the people who loved them. He spoke of the cost of war and the enduring burden carried by soldiers. When he finished, silence descended. Then slowly, a Valyrian in the crowd began to clap. Others joined in. Not everyone. Some departed in disgust, but a sufficient number remained. Enough to make a difference. At the conclusion of the ceremony, both memorials, the Valyrian and the human, were officially designated as shared memorial sites. Both species would be responsible for their upkeep. Both would honor the fallen from both sides, and visitors would be welcomed regardless of their planetary origin. This did not erase everything. Grief, anger, and loss were not expunged by a single gesture or a series of ceremonies, but it was a commencement, a recognition that the soldiers who had fought were more than their uniforms, more than their orders. They were individuals who had made agonizing choices under dire circumstances, and they deserved to be remembered fully, in all their complexity. Nathan never departed Sanctus Prime. He assumed the role of the official human liaison to the memorial services. He dedicated his days to assisting families from both species in locating the names of their lost loved ones. He organized remembrance events. He trained other veterans who wished to volunteer at the memorial. He discovered a sense of purpose in the very thing that had once threatened to destroy him. Phelan remained the commander of the Valyrian Guard on Sanctus Prime. He and Nathan developed a friendship, a prospect neither would have envisioned years earlier when they were attempting to eliminate each other across vast expanses of space. They spent their evenings discussing the war, its implications, and strategies for preventing future conflicts. One night, while sitting beneath the twin moons, Nathan posed a question that had been weighing on him. "Do you believe we have made a difference? Do you think any of this truly matters?" Phelan contemplated the question carefully. 6 months ago, I would have answered no. I would have said that the dead are gone, and flowers change nothing. But I have witnessed families find solace here. I have seen veterans from both sides engage in dialogue rather than conflict. I have observed young Valorans and young humans collaborating to maintain these memorials. So, yes, I believe it matters. Not because it alters the past, but because it transforms us. Nathan offered a faint smile. "You have become remarkably wise, Commander." "I learned from a human," Phelan replied. "A very stubborn, very foolish human who believed it was important to leave flowers for his adversaries." Years elapsed. The memorials on Sanctus Prime evolved into sites of pilgrimage for both species. Schools brought students to impart lessons about the war and its costs. Veterans came to remember. Families came to mourn. And gradually the planet transitioned from a symbol of conflict to a testament of what followed, the arduous work of peace. Nathan aged. His hair turned completely gray, then white. His steps grew slower. Yet every morning he still made his way to the wall, still placed flowers, still spoke to the names etched in stone. One morning, Phelan found him seated on a bench near Captain Nass's name. Nathan appeared weary, a weariness unrelated to age. "I believe," Nathan said quietly, "that I am ready to return home." Phelan sat beside him. "To Earth?" "No," Nathan responded. "Here. This is home now. But I think I am ready to relinquish this burden, to let it rest, to forgive myself, perhaps." Phelan placed a hand on the human's shoulder, a gesture of comfort that had taken years to become natural between their species. "Then you should. You have earned that peace." "Have I?" Nathan inquired. "Yes," Phelan affirmed firmly. "You have spent 15 years honoring the dead. You have aided more individuals than you will ever comprehend. You have transmuted your grief into something meaningful. If Captain Nas could speak, I believe he would tell you that you have more than made amends." Nathan gazed at the name on the wall for a long time. Then he stood, placed one final bundle of flowers at the base of the memorial, and said, "Thank you, Captain, for teaching me the true meaning of bearing responsibility. I hope you rest peacefully." They walked together back to the memorial center. Nathan moved to the human section where the names of Terran soldiers were carved into black stone. He found the name he was searching for, Lieutenant Sarah Morgan, the pilot who had saved Thalan's life. He placed flowers there as well. "She was brave," Nathan remarked. "I read her file. She volunteered for the most perilous missions, always striving to minimize casualties, even those of the enemy. Humanity could have benefited from more soldiers like her. We all could have." Phelan concurred. In the subsequent years, Nathan's health declined. Age caught up with him, exacerbated by the years of stress and guilt he had carried. However, he never ceased his work at the memorial. Even when he required assistance to walk, he insisted on completing his daily rounds. Younger volunteers, both human and Valyrian, learned from him. They heard his stories. They understood the profound weight of what had transpired there, and the importance of remembrance. When Nathan Brooks finally passed away at the age of 73, his funeral was held at the memorial. Thousands attended. Valorans and humans stood shoulder to shoulder, military officers from both fleets, families who had lost loved ones in the war, young people who knew only peace, but understood its immense cost. Phelan delivered the eulogy. He recounted meeting Nathan that first night, his initial confusion and anger, his observation of this human soldier transforming grief into purpose, and his discovery of what true courage looked like. "Nathan Brooks was my enemy," Phelan declared to the assembled crowd. "He killed people I cared about. He made choices that resulted in the loss of Valerie and numerous lives, and for the remainder of his days, he dedicated himself to ensuring those individuals were not forgotten. He impressed upon me that conflict does not conclude with the cessation of hostilities. Rather, it reaches its end when we consciously choose to perceive one another as more than adversaries. This occurs when we opt to pay homage to the fallen on both sides, and when we embrace the more arduous path of comprehension over the facile route of animosity. Nathan was laid to rest at the monument within a designated area for those who had devoted their lives to fostering peace. His tombstone was unadorned, bearing simply his name, the duration of his service, and a solitary phrase he had specifically requested. He endeavored to recall. Each morning flowers would appear beside his grave. On occasion, they were left by Valerans who had been influenced by his teachings. At other times, they were placed by humans who had journeyed from Earth to pay him tribute. And sometimes, they were from young people who had never experienced the war firsthand, but comprehended what he represented. Phelan continued his endeavors at the monument for an additional 10 years. Upon his eventual retirement, he opted to remain on Sanctus Prime. He spent his final years strolling the grounds, engaging with visitors, and ensuring that the narratives were conveyed accurately. He passed away peacefully at the age of 86. He was interred alongside Nathan, his former adversary, who had evolved into his most cherished companion. The monument endures to this day, a place where two distinct species learn to transcend their most regrettable moments. It is a site where inscriptions on stone serve as a perpetual reminder to the living of the immense cost of discord. It is a place where blossoms materialize each dawn, arranged by a dedicated corps of volunteers who understand that commemoration is not about glorifying warfare, but about revering the individuals who endured it. The Valyrian hegemony and the Terran Federation never engaged in further armed conflict. While they did not forge close alliances, they maintained a relationship of mutual respect from a distance. They engaged in trade and communicated. When disagreements arose, they pursued negotiation rather than the mobilization of their naval forces. And invariably, when tensions began to escalate, emissaries from both factions would undertake a pilgrimage to Sanctus Prime, to the monument where a human serviceman had once secretly left flowers, and there they would reflect on the true price of war. Within the memorial complex, a museum now stands. It houses relics from the conflict, including armaments, uniforms, and personal belongings retrieved from the sites of battles. However, the focal point of the museum is a modest exhibit. It showcases the initial floral offerings left by Nathan, preserved through stasis technology. Adjacent to these artifacts is a spectral recording of his confession to Thalen, elucidating his motivations for his actions. Millions of individuals have viewed this recording. Students study it in their academic pursuits. Military personnel observe it during their training regimens. Parents present it to their offspring to convey the profound significance of peace. And every person who witnesses it gains a fundamental understanding of what it entails to be a sentient, feeling entity, irrespective of whether they are human, Valoran, or any of the multitude of other species that have subsequently become integrated into the galactic community. Errors can be acknowledged. Wrongdoing can be rectified. Adversaries can evolve into something different if both parties elect fortitude over complacency. And at times, the most potent act of defiance against the apparatus of war is to remember the individuals it consumed, to honor them, irrespective of which side they fought for, and to ensure their ultimate sacrifices held meaning. The blossoms continue to appear each morning at the monument. New volunteers have embraced the tradition initiated by Nathan. They place roses, lilies, and orchids at the base of the structure. They vocalize the names of the deceased, ensuring they are not forgotten. They recount the saga of the human soldier who found no solace until he had made amends. And in the hushed intervals preceding dawn, as the twin moons bathe the crystalline stone in a silvery luminescence, and the flowers await their placement, if one listens intently, a subtle resonance might be perceived. Not precisely voices nor spectral apparitions, but perhaps the faint hum of ancient wounds beginning to mend. The sound of two civilizations learning that the antithesis of conflict is not merely an absence of strife, but rather the courageous resolve to honor life even in the shadow of death, to cultivate understanding even in the aftermath of discord, and to sow blossoms even in the very soil of sorrow. Nathan Brooks bestowed more than mere flowers at that monument. He bequeathed a vital lesson that has resonated through generations. that humanity's preeminent strength lies not in its weaponry, its strategic maneuvers, or its unwavering refusal to yield. It resides in the inherent capacity to confront the gravest of one's transgressions, to bear that burden with unvarnished sincerity, and then to dedicate every remaining day to the pursuit of rendering the universe a marginally better place than it was upon one's arrival, to venerate the departed and to serve the living, to perpetually remember that every individual, even those once deemed enemies, was someone's cherished companion. The monument will endure for epochs. The names inscribed upon it will be recited for generations to come, and the floral tributes, placed each dawn by hands, both human and Valoran, will continue to flourish. They stand as a testament to what transpires when combatants opt for remembrance over oblivion, when adversaries choose comprehension over animosity, and when a single individual determines that seeking atonement outweighs the imperative of self-preservation from emotional distress. Ultimately, Nathan Brooks proved to be correct. It did indeed consume the remainder of his existence, but he ensured that the fallen were not consigned to obscurity. He ensured their sacrifices were duly honored. He ensured that subsequent generations comprehended the true toll of warfare. In doing so, he elucidated a fundamental truth that military strategists and political leaders had consistently failed to fully grasp. Humanity's formidable nature stems not solely from its capacity for fierce combat. They are formidable because they possess an enduring memory, because they carry their deceased comrades with them, because they will traverse hostile expanses and risk everything merely to place flowers upon the grave of an adversary. Because when a human being deems something of paramount importance, when they determine that honor mandates decisive action, no force within the galaxy can compel them to falter. The Valyrian Empire had anticipated confronting soldiers in their engagement with humans. What they encountered instead was something far more formidable, a species that pursued peace with the same fervor with which they waged war. That applied the same unyielding resolve to constructing bridges as they had to raising them. That could perceive a person within an enemy. That could transmute sorrow into purpose and guilt into personal growth. And that, in the final analysis, was the reason for humanity's triumph. Not victory in the war itself, but something of far greater consequence. They secured the peace. They secured the future. They secured the opportunity to demonstrate to the entire galaxy that strength is measured not merely by the ferocity of one's blows, but by the weight one is willing to bear, the distances one is prepared to traverse, and the depth of one's capacity to care. The blossoms unfurl each morning at the memorial. Crimson roses, alabaster lilies, golden daisies, sapphire orchids, every conceivable hue, species, and variety. They are arranged with meticulous care by volunteers who learned from Nathan Brooks that certain obligations do not cease when hostilities conclude. Certain responsibilities persist throughout a lifetime, and certain acts of bravery occur not on the battlefield, but in those tranquil moments when one chooses remembrance over forgetting, honor over animosity, and construction over devastation. And that concludes this narrative. If you have persevered through this entire account, kindly consider leaving your feedback in the comments section, detailing your thoughts on the story, whether positive or negative, as your input aids our ongoing improvement. Furthermore, please bestow a like and subscribe to the channel for more narratives of this nature. I will now present another video on the screen, which I am confident you will find engaging. A warm embrace, and until our next encounter.